birds, people, community gardens, and a scientist that studied human and bird interaction. Hey all, I want to share a story with you. Instead of focusing on a plant or animal, this story involves the people part of nature, centering a person who's working with nature and investigating questions. This is Kelley. She's a nature-loving, ever-smiling, wonderful human being who's working on her PhD. I got to talk to her earlier this year and was so inspired to learn about her work in the intersection of conservation, birds, and people. With Kelley's permission, I wanted to share her research story and what she has been working on with you all.
So I'm really interested in access to nature, human-animal relationships in cities, and in particular in my research project, I'm looking at human-bird relationships in community gardens in San Francisco. And what I'm interested in overall is sort of how people's interactions with animals changes across neighborhoods with different incomes in the city, to ask a question of, who is able to have positive experiences with nature in the city and who isn't? Are there more sort of positive human-nature interactions in maybe higher income neighborhoods or lower income neighborhoods? And I chose community gardens because they're, first of all, a green space in a city that attracts a lot of animals, but second of all, a place that's sort of really important to people as well, and a type of green space that's usually really community-oriented and a place that people have a lot of different values around. And to do that, what I'm doing is studying 20 different community gardens in San Francisco, in neighborhoods that are both low income and high income, and both counting birds and surveying people.
Speaking of her research in community gardens, I got to go with Kelley to one of her research sites, the Florence Fang Community Farm in SF. While we were there, we got to see more about the farm, which I hope to share in a separate video.
Yeah, so to count the birds, we went to 20 sites and we visited each one of them both in the morning and the afternoon, and we would go stand in the center of the site and count all the birds that we saw and heard in the farm for 15 minutes. In July and August. And then to survey people and find out what they felt about birds, we went back in the fall of the same year to the same 20 sites and gave people a survey. Specifically, we gave gardeners a survey asking them how they felt about access to nature in the city, how they felt about nature in the garden, and how they felt about 10 specific species of birds that we noticed were common in the gardens in the summer. And we were doing this to figure out both how people feel about birds and nature overall, and also how they feel about specific species that might sort of differ across the gardens. Figure out, if people really like a certain species, at which gardens are people able to come into contact with the species that they really care about. When I started out, I kind of went into the ecological fieldwork part where I was just going to count birds without really knowing anybody from any of the gardens. But in the process of doing that, I got to meet a lot of people who would just sort of see me with binoculars, would walk up, curious, ask, what are you doing? Are you seeing any cool birds? I got to know a really excellent set of partners at the San Francisco Parks and Rec Community Garden Program, which administers a lot of the gardens we work with. And they also helped introduce me to a lot of garden volunteer coordinators who then welcomed me to their volunteer days. It's incredibly rewarding because you meet really cool, really interesting, really sweet people. But it also requires really a lot of people work and really honestly, a lot of emailing and putting in hours volunteering and earning people's trust. So a lot of going up to people and talking to them, which can be scary, but is often really rewarding. I think I was really lucky with this project. Community gardeners are really, really friendly. So yeah, it was really great. I met a lot of wonderful people. I'm hoping to keep going back and volunteer at some of the gardens and sort of keep being friends with my new gardener friends.
Have you ever considered what your relationship with nature is? Does nature connect you to your culture? Do you relate to it emotionally or spiritually? Studies have shown the importance of being in nature and how it affects people's mental health and well-being. With the importance of urban access to nature, it is not yet well studied how people value nature in urban spaces around them. And specifically in Kelley's case, she wanted to investigate people and nature in cities through studying people and birds in community gardens.
From this research, what I'm really interested in learning is, in a really broad sense, where there are inequities in access to nature and how we might improve those to help provide people with nature experiences that they really care about and they really value. So both learning like from the patterns that we see in this work, where there are places where people aren't having like as good experiences with nature, and also learning through this work what are some things that people might really value about coming into contact with nature. So when we're saying we want to improve access to nature in the city, we're not just saying like, oh, we should just put a park here and everybody will like that. We're saying like, well, we know that like actually what people really care about is like seeing birds or being able to plant vegetables or things like that, and then ensuring that when we're creating nature experiences for people in the city, those very specific values that people have around nature are taken into account. So that's the sort of broad takeaway that I'm hoping to get from my research. The very specific one is I'm interested in finding out what species of birds people care about and sort of whether people care about birds overall. And then from my research, from the really ecological part, I'm hoping to be able to give recommendations to people for how to attract birds that they care about and attract more birds in general to their gardens. So that's something that I'm hoping to be able to sort of give back to the communities who have been generous enough to let me work with them. I think I got into this work because I really care about nature, and I really value like sort of everyday interactions with nature, like noticing like the trees around me outside of my home and like noticing the birds I see on the way to work and things. And I guess if there were one thing that I would be excited for people to take away from this work, is that there is nature all around us. Even if you live in the city, even if you live in a super like densely populated or super urbanized space, and noticing that nature can be really exciting and really fun. There's so much to learn about it and so much to see and so much to experience. So I would encourage people to go out into their neighborhoods around them and see what's there and learn from other people too who do that and do it in community. It's a really wonderful thing and something that I really appreciated seeing people do in this project. For people who are interested in getting involved in birding, I think I actually consider myself like a pretty novice birder, even though I'm a bird researcher, but actually it's like quite easy to get into birding. I really learned a lot through this project. A lot of the people I met at the gardens were actually much better at birding than I was and were really generous teaching me. I had a really fantastic research assistant who also taught me a lot. I think a really good way to get into birding is to find some people who know something about birds and have them teach you. I really enjoy that, learning from other people. I also highly recommend the Merlin app from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. You can choose on the app where you are and it'll give you a list of the likely birds that are there. It's like a really cool way to sort of start building up your list of birds that you can recognize. And also field guides are great, but I know not everybody's a field guide person. Yeah, I think research can also seem like a big, intimidating scientific thing. But actually, research is just sort of the process of being curious about the world around you and then asking questions in a very particular methodological way to try to get at a particular sort of answer. So if you're interested in getting involved in research, I would say the most important thing is curiosity, and the second most important thing is the determination to see it through to the end, and all the other things sort of fall in between. If you are interested and you just want to take the first steps, a really good way to do that can be to get involved in other people's research projects. There's a lot of really good sort of community participatory science research out there, so there are projects that you can get involved in, other people's research projects, and they'll sort of train you on the methods, and then you can go out on your own and collect data and contribute to this larger research effort. You can also reach out to researchers at local universities or community colleges and see if they're able to talk to you about their research or if they need any help on their project. So that's what I recommend.
Thank you, Kelley. It was a really lovely experience to sit down with Kelley and learn about the work she's been doing around people, birds, and community gardens for the past year. I didn't even know research combining bird surveying methods and interviewing people could be done. It seems like people's relationship with nature in cities is an area that still has a lot of potential to be studied further to inform decisions and improve our living spaces. There are many ways people in cities are connected to nature, and a small way to do that could be noticing the birds around you. Nature is all around you. Noticing it and relating to it in whatever way is meaningful to you can enrich your life. I hope that listening to Kelley's story was thought-provoking. If you have any questions that came up from listening to her work or about her process, feel free to share in the comments. And let me know if you want to see more stories like this. Thank you for watching.